Hey, here we are again, another day on planet Earth. I know I say this all the time. At least I think it's planet Earth. Who knows? Maybe we're all in a dream. And I think my guest today, Julie Booksh, she might be in a little bit alignment with that thought that maybe we aren't even on Earth, because she does a lot of really cool things in her life and has done a lot of very cool things in her practices. So I'm sure as the conversation flows, you'll get that from Julie. So welcome. Welcome to Impeccable Soul Care, Julie.
Thank you, Teri. I'm so happy to be here to talk to you about all of this stuff.
Yeah, whatever it is that comes up. When I sent Julie a message, listeners, I said, well, we can talk about this, this, and this. However, it's spirit driven, and she gets that too. She's all about going with the flow of what spirit has to offer. And we've been trying off and on for a few years to get together. So I'm glad it finally happened.
I know, it feels right. I mean, not that it felt wrong before, but for whatever reason, everything aligned now. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, obviously, the obvious is COVID, right? COVID did a lot for all of us to have us take a breath and figure out what's what in our own lives, and even in our businesses and in our practices. You have a practice working with people, helping them ignite their own soul. And I'm sure that was a challenge the last couple of years, trying to figure out, okay, how can I help these people in a deeper way?
Yeah, well, that's, I guess, always been a question, but certainly during times that we've seen civil unrest, COVID, so much going on in our world. And I haven't seen clients one-on-one in quite some time, but I do a lot of group work with people. So all during COVID, I kept working with at least one of the groups that I had going on for a while. And it was not that it isn't always important, but it was extra important because there were so many existential questions. I mean, life or death, at the beginning of COVID. Now we're all talking about it, knowing what it is. At the beginning, it was, what is this thing? We can't see each other. We can't touch each other. How do we protect ourselves? Vaccine, no vaccine. I mean, it was so many, and not to mention the most of it, which was people who were dying and people who were losing their loved ones, and people being hospitalized and not getting to go see their loved ones. So it was a lot of unfamiliar territory.
It seems like it's all unfamiliar, right? Like even though we know more about it, it's still unfamiliar because, as you said a minute ago, that's civil unrest, and there's so much division happening, right? Sometimes I think the best we can do is look at ourselves. And as I was looking at some of the things that you're offering to groups and, people all over the world, one of the things that really struck me at the core was mercy. And I think now more than ever, we need to show mercy, and we need to show it for ourselves.
Yeah. So mercy has been part of my practice and my teaching since long before COVID. And I'm so thankful for that, because when things like COVID, like we'd never seen anything like that before, but when things get chaotic and unsettling, I was so grateful to have been practicing mercy for as long as I had when all of that started to unravel. And mercy is a self-compassion. It's a creating space for me and my feelings. I call it a safe place to feel. And what people don't always, myself included, don't always realize is how very harsh we are on ourselves, because we live I mean, some of it could be our individual backgrounds. I was raised strict Catholic. Everything had to reconcile back to the church's order. Your experience didn't matter so much. Just get yourself in line. And that's just one example. We could then go into the greater culture of, the 5 steps to be happy, and that our overemphasis on happy and our overemphasis on feeling good all the time, which is a very harmful psychology. So, and a rigid psychology. And to me, there's no spirituality, there's no peace in that. So mercy is about learning how to bring yourself to yourself in a loving way. And I picture that as if maybe the smaller part of me is going to this bigger part of me. And I don't mean that as in one is better or worse. I mean, there's just this one part going to this other part, looking for a place that says it is safe to feel whatever you feel with me, and I'm not going to try to change that. And we live in a culture that wants to hurry up and change that. And it's a very shaming lens to witness ourselves and each other through. Mercy counters that. Mercy says, come in, dear. Tell me more. Sit with me. Let me hold you. Tell me all about it, which is very different than even sometimes even our well-intentioned friends. We go to them with a feeling and they immediately want to tell us what to do about it.
Yeah.
So mercy counters, and I could go on and on and on, but mercy begins to create a space and allows us to show up as we are, knowing that there's nothing that needs to be fixed right now.
Yeah,
it's
sitting in it, right? Allow yourself the space to sit in it without judgment and without hurrying on to release that pain and suffering. I think I have a Pollyanna attitude, and yet at the same token, I know my practice and myself well enough that if I hurry through a pain or a suffering or even a feeling of guilt and shame, and I begin to ask myself more like, okay, what is this? As opposed to get over it and show myself some love.
Yeah. And, I have so much to say. I will say that when I want to go further than sit in it. I want to go further than sit in it. I'm trying to find the right words. I want to say, be with it. Yeah. Wrap your arms around it. And by it, I mean you. And because when you do that, when I have done that, and certainly not every single time, every time is different, I meet part of myself that either I haven't met before or I've met before and I've shunned. So now when I do that, when I abandon myself or I send that part away, I'm not whole. I'm walking around lopsided. And I think this is where body symptoms and all kinds of symptoms help us become less lopsided. They're signals, and they're not just signals, they're real things, but it's being with it in a way that wraps reverence around it, that doesn't look at it as this is bad, that looks at it as you're having this human experience. And for me, the most spiritual things that we can do, if you want to know how to live a spiritual life, if you want to know how to connect more deeply to the divine, become fully human. I think that in a lot of the spiritual world, we've made divine better than human. And we've marginalized our human experiences all for the sake of trying to catch this divine, free, soft thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not reality. But when I can learn how to be fully human in all of its struggles, then I touch something deep in me. And this is where mercy becomes a fierce ally. Mercy kind of makes a circle around me and says, let her grieve. Let's just say grieve. Let
Yeah.
her feel her pain. Let her cry. Let her mourn for days.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to come in and tell her to hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to come in and tell her she shouldn't feel this way, or try to talk her out of her feelings, or take up for the people who hurt her, or whatever it is. And when I can let that experience, my experience, emerge, my real experience, not my edited experience of what I think should be, but what I actually am feeling, when I take all the shame off of it and witness it with a loving lens, man, I meet not only a very deep part of me, but I meet a space where becomes hard to discern the difference between what is me and what is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've created this space of love where when I can hold the boundary around it, and it's not easy, and there's nothing wrong with it being hard, but I meet a love inside of me, and then a big love comes rushing in. And it
Mm.
all happens kind of so much at the same time, you can't really define it. And I don't think it should be defined any further than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a, I will call it, there have been times for me where it has been devastatingly beautiful.
Mm.
I can be mourning and weeping and full of joy and stillness all at the same time. And to me, that paradox is the divine, or God, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, your true self.
Mm-hmm.
That I can be still in all of the wounds and all of the grieving. And mercy is an enormous part of that.
Mm-hmm. What I heard, okay, what I heard was during all of that, you said we have the thought that we are the divine, that the divine is something outside of ourselves, and that when we allow ourselves to be with it, to embrace it, to embrace whatever it is we're feeling, fear, guilt, shame, grief, whatever it is, that
Mhm.
we have a deeper ability of seeing the divine within ourselves. That's what I hear. And being that,
Yes.
right?
And
And to allow yourself to be that.
yes, and it's not, for me at least, it's not always what I thought the divine looked like.
Yeah.
Right? It, like, being spiritual does not mean the absence of chaos.
Right.
Being spiritual
Oh,
does not, just like being happy does not equal the absence of struggle. I mean, I say all the time in one of the classes I teach that we'd be happier if we knew how to struggle better, right?
yeah.
So, and we
Yeah,
don't want to learn how to
absolutely.
struggle better, right? So it's, but we're all trying to avoid struggle as if we struggle, it means we're doing something wrong or we're being punished. This is where bad old religion is still rearing its ugly head in so much of
Yeah.
our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the part about embracing it, I only want to emphasize that word. While I don't disagree with it, I like to go further with it, because embracing it doesn't mean I like it.
Right.
It doesn't mean, oh, I embrace it, so now it all feels good. No, it means, crap, I can't, like, I keep trying to change myself. I'm exhausted. It's more like a falling into it
Mm-hmm.
for me than an embracing it. I'm embracing me maybe, but I'm also falling into this feeling that I've been resisting without even realizing I was resisting it. Some of it's
Mm-hmm.
so automatic and unconscious because we're all raised on it in one way or another,
Yeah.
that it's hard to recognize when you're doing it.
Right.
So, so yeah, for me, it's like a falling into it. And as I do that, I may be embracing, but that's me. That's Julie's path. For each person, when you move into this kind of work, it shows up. What emerges is different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Each person's own path shows up for them. It's not, there's no like singular way that I can say to people like, oh yeah, do this and then this will happen.
Right.
Oops. It's it's not that way at all.
It's not that way with anything, right? And isn't that to me, that's the path of spirituality, how it needs to be, how the beauty of what it could look like if it were taught from that perspective instead of, I was raised a Catholic too. Nuns,
Mm.
priests, monsignors, they're all there in my family. And so
Oh
I
yeah.
get that. And it was all around shame, guilt, do as I say, not as I do, all of that. And I remember as I changed my spiritual practice and for anyway, I remember somebody asking me, what do you think of Jesus? This is a woman that was a born again Christian, homeschool, blah, 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 asked me, well, what do you think of Jesus? And I said, well, she said, what do you think is going to happen when you die? I said, well, if he is the person that greets me on the other side, he's going to have his arms wide open and say, it's about fucking time you got here. I said, he's not going to sit there and tell me all the things I did wrong, right? He's going to say,
Absolutely
come
not.
on, let's have a party. And
I,
we have been taught to shame and to avoid and to not sit with and to give our power away to something else instead of
right.
holding it and nurturing it
Right.
and letting it be whatever it needs to be.
Absolutely. I always the Jesus topic is I've written a lot about that. Um I always kind of chuckle because Jesus was never that in his actual historical life. He was never he was the opposite of this shaming, keeping score,
Yeah.
person. And so it's just funny that a whole religion has been created um with the opposite of what he actually stood against. So, but
Yeah.
man, that's like a whole
I think
nother.
that could be a whole nother show, right? That could probably be
Absolutely.
a week long
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about something a little bit softer, maybe, and that is reimagining happiness. Because I have a
Mm,
feeling you have a lot to say about that based upon the work that you're doing with it. So we're going
yeah.
to take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Alrighty. Yep, and it looks like we did run into you getting booted for just a moment, but we got you back right in.
Yeah. Why is
Oh,
that
so you didn't
happening?
even know? I didn't even know if you like you came right back. I'm like, did she know she was just booted? Because you would just
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
like,
Yeah. It comes up on my screen and it says, your recording reload. And then it says you
oh,
push
right.
reload and then it says, are you sure you want to reload? And I'm like, well, what else am I supposed to do here? You know?
Right, right.
So
Yep, and even if that affected your recording, Terry, I should still have the audio, so I should be able to stitch it together.
yeah, he'll fix it. He's the whiz.
Ah, cool.
I
Right.
just
Oh,
I
That's
just
why he
keep
does what he does.
yeah, I just keep going. I know he'll fix it. So okay,
Yeah.
so we're ready to pop back in.
perfect.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I
Yes. Yes.
It goes by so fast, doesn't it?
I know. Oh, yeah. Always.
perfect.
Feels
All
like
But
right.
even the little breaks are so fast.
Yep, and if you need to grab some water or something, you can go ahead and do so right now.
I'm
I'm
good.
good. I got my water.
I should
All
have
right.
tea. I think we're good.
All right. Well, I'm going to pop
Yeah.
back up, have a sip of tea, and then Terry, you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Tony.
Oh, my dog is in the back.
All right. Well, welcome back, listeners. I'm having a conversation with Julie Booksh. And if you just popped in, you're going to want to go back and listen as we talked about mercy. And now we're going to talk about something a little bit lighter, maybe. I don't know. I am as in the dark about that topic as you are. So, okay, Julie. So I know the work that you are offering has to do with reimagining happiness. You did a talk on it, and I'd like to know, what does that look like? How do we do that? Why would we want to?
Well, I think we can talk about some tangible ideas because really the topic has
Oh, she froze.
that
I froze.
Yep, she froze again. Julie, can you just make that point one more time and then just keep going from there?
Yeah, so just like pick up where Teri left off?
Yeah, pretty much. Just kind of re-answer that question, go from there.
Okay, cool. So it might not be lighter, but we can certainly get into some lighter, tangible pieces of that. But really, it has a lot to do with what we've already been talking about, which is our culture has an overemphasis on what I call a toxic happiness, that we should always be in the same mood and that mood should be happy. And we are not supposed to feel the same thing all the time. Humans forget that we are also nature, and nature changes if you look outside your window, depending on where you are. But here in the Midwest, it's fall and colorful and beautiful. But nature changes, and so do we. Here in Michigan, we have a saying, just wait a minute, the weather changes, and you can experience like 4 seasons in one single day. Well, I have felt that way too. I could be crying 1 minute, laughing the next, feeling sad, the next hour, and feeling hopeful an hour after that. So rethinking happiness is about learning to have a little bit more fluidity in our experiences, our emotional experiences, and knowing that it's okay. Not only is it okay, it's healthy to go through different emotions and feelings. And learning how to care for those when they're the ones that we call the more difficult or less fun feelings is a big part of rethinking happiness. So as I said earlier, learning how to struggle better. And that whole idea of mercy we were talking about, where we create a space to bring ourselves just as we are, and we don't have to poke and prod and push ourselves to feel something other than what we're actually feeling, but rather we can learn how to feel that with love and tenderness and care. So as far as the mercy part goes, I had an idea come to my head when you were saying maybe this will be a little lighter. One of the things that I have used, and I've taught it in just about every class that I teach, people ask me, well, how do I, because so much of it's unconscious, this harshness that we have on ourselves. How do I begin to create this more loving voice? How do I do this? And while that could be a whole week, because for me, certainly that journey has taken years of practice and will continue. But one of my favorite tools is very simple. I write on a sheet of paper, how are you, Julie? And of course, Teri would write Teri, and whatever your name is would be your name. How are you, Julie? And I let myself answer the question without any editing, without writing what I think I should feel, without judging what I am writing. So in other words, if I say, I'm pissed, a shaming voice could quickly come in and tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't be, particularly if it's I'm pissed at somebody. Oh, well, so-and-so didn't mean it, blah, blah, blah. All of that stifles my flow of feeling. All of that tells me you shouldn't feel this. So my little practice, how are you, Julie, is my safe place to feel what I actually feel. And that place is protected because it's on paper. It's in the privacy of my own home. It's just for me at first. And I can write whatever I want. And the goal is to stand guard against anything that's telling me I shouldn't write that, I shouldn't feel that, that's trying to talk me out of my feelings. So that's a very simple and, for me, moving practice that helped me begin to create a place to feel that then transfers over into my life. You practice it on paper, but then you catch yourself while you're still moving in life, going from one thing to the next. You catch yourself stopping all of the you shouldn't feel that way and just kind of letting it be, letting it breathe.
Yeah. So somebody's spiraling and they just ask themselves that. And write it down and let it flow like a stream of consciousness kind of writing without going back and erasing or crossing it off. Just let it flow. And it sounds like it's something that until you are used to it, you might have to practice it often. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you still practice this in your life when you're feeling that
Every
way?
now and then, but much less so, because now I know how to do it in my head, so to speak. I can do it in real time. But there are times, don't get me wrong, where if something's really got me, sometimes I can just close my eyes and go through it in my mind, and I can facilitate the different parts of myself. But sometimes I still need the paper. I used to actually write on paper, because one of my rethinking happiness tenets, if I could say it that way, is that we're taught to put a certain face forward and hide all the other faces. And all the other faces in the shadow are very important parts of us. And we're taught to marginalize and abandon ourselves, essentially. So another exercise I used to do was I would write almost like a play, right? It would say me, and then it would say anxiety, and then it would say me or my inner torturer, and I'd have a conversation between the two. So I've learned how to do all these things much faster. But at the beginning, writing, "How are you, Julie?" and letting myself just go. And I want to say, sometimes I knew I would be like spinning, and I'd try to write, "How are you, Julie?" And I wouldn't be able to, I would write, "I don't fucking know." Like, I would get mad at the question, but that helped me then express what I was feeling. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know how I feel. I just feel, because so many adults, and I see this in relationships all the time, don't know how to identify what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So the practice, that simple question, is kind of like a multifaceted practice. One, it helps you start to identify what you're feeling. I know I'm frustrated. Okay, well, can I go deeper with that? I'm frustrated because, and then I start to tell the whole story. And then it just in real time starts to unfold as I give it the space to unfold. But at first, my answer is a bunch of scribbly marks on the piece of paper because I'm frustrated and I just gotta, So, and I do tell people, because some people are visual, some people express themselves in pictures. It doesn't have to be words. Right. It could be pictures. It could be things that abstract, concrete. It doesn't have to make sense. The whole thing is judgment-free zone of, I'm mad as hell. Right. And even if part of me knows, okay, that the person that I'm mad at, let's say, really has no idea what they did. Right. So there's a part that wants to tell me I shouldn't be mad, even though a part of me knows maybe that's partially true. I'm going to get nowhere if I don't let the other part of me that's mad have it out on the page.
Right. Well, I feel like that's where that cycle comes in. If you're not allowing that anger and that flow, that's where that repetitive cycle comes in, where all of a sudden you blow up. And
exactly.
Right? You blow up. And you said something, as adults, we don't know this. I lived in a household where nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about your feelings, right?
No.
Nobody talked about that. And so if we aren't open to learning, or we don't have somebody that is skilled enough to give us some tools, like tools for anything else in life that we're going to practice, then we're going to continue to have those moments where we're spiraling and we get lost. Right?
Absolutely. And this is where that mercy piece keeps coming up. So the little practice I'm talking about is starting to create a merciful practice that lets me vent or whatever. But also, like you brought up the example of when we don't do stuff like this, when we don't sit with ourselves and try to, like, okay, what's going on with me? What's going on in me? And then we explode at somebody. what happens is the shame cycle doubles down, because now we're going to shame ourselves for exploding. Okay. So now I'm even more of a shame because I blew up. And the problem with that, I mean, there's many problems, is that the original thing I was mad at gets completely lost because now it's all about the way I behaved. Right. But that thing is still there. So the mercy part comes in what you were saying, Teri. I didn't grow up in a household where we talked about feelings. And if we did, it was usually like, okay, you're angry. Yeah, you shouldn't be. It's like, you shouldn't feel something. Okay. The mercy part is to remind ourselves, I'm not supposed to know this. Like, no one ever taught me this. Right. So I am going to screw up. And that doesn't make me a bad person. Right. That's the thing about shame. It makes you think you're bad. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of shame. You're bad. Screwing up does not mean, making mistakes does not mean I'm bad. It doesn't mean I'm less spiritual. It doesn't mean I'm less evolved. It means I'm human. Yeah. And just like every other person on the planet and beyond, I screw up. And so the mercy part for me, almost the biggest part of, I'm so glad you said that, almost the mercy is how we treat ourselves when we do screw up. Mm-hmm. Because many of us, if anybody out there is like me, if I screw up, I used to be really hard on myself. Can't believe you did that.
And Teri, she froze for me. Is she frozen for you?
Yeah.
Oh, Julie, you just froze a little bit. Would you mind giving that answer again? I think we probably still have the audio.
How do I know where I was? Do you know where I was?
You said something like the biggest part of all of that.
Okay. Can I just roll?
Yeah, you just go. He'll make it sound good no matter what.
Okay. So the biggest part of I say the biggest, I don't really know if it's the biggest, but an enormous part of this mercy thing that we're talking about, this mercy practice, is how we treat ourselves when we screw up. Mm-hmm. And if any of you out there listening are like me, I can be so mean. And I didn't know it was mean when I was doing it. Right. But now when I look back, oh God, I cry for that person because, it was so bad. You can't screw up. That you should know better than this. You really hurt that person, or whatever the language of shame, you're bad, would be. The mercy, when you really get into this practice of mercy, is you learn how to say, of course you screwed up. Who are you to think that you don't screw up? Of course you screw up. We all screw up. And it doesn't make you less spiritual. It doesn't make you less evolved. It doesn't mean you need to work on yourself more than other people, or that you don't have things figured out like other people do, which is bullshit. When I can treat myself, when I catch myself, right? When I catch myself shaming myself, or when I catch myself doing some habit that I don't like anymore, don't beat yourself up for catching yourself. Celebrate the catch.
Yeah.
I used to beat myself up for catching myself. Yeah. Oh, you did it again. It was this like that. You did it again. It was like that. Oh, you need to go to confession and confess your sins kind of energy. But, oh, sweetheart, of course you screwed up. Oh, you need to cry about it? Okay. You need to write about it? Okay. You need to be mad about it? Okay. But of course you screwed up. Of course you did. It's okay. No one ever taught you this. Yeah, and even if they did, it still doesn't mean you're perfect.
Right. And you're still learning, and you're still allowing, and you have a willingness to keep going, and to, as you're talking, it's like, I see you have this willingness, like you said earlier, to give yourself a hug, right? If it were my kids, I would say to them, okay, come on, let's just talk about it, right? I'm here no matter what. I'm not going anywhere. I hear you. I love you. I want to be with you. Let's get this. And so we do.
There's
that
nothing wrong with you.
And it's a game changer.
Yes. And my gauge is my dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually wrote a class about this. It's called the New Dogma, DOG-MA, because it's all these lessons my dog has taught me. But my gauge is when I can talk to myself the way
Yeah.
that I talk to her. You know, she throws up on the floor or something. I don't go, oh, you stupid idiot. I can't believe you did that. I go, oh, sweetheart, come here. What's the matter? My dog is my gauge for me on how merciful, how well I'm doing with mercy. And I shouldn't say well, because I'm trying to get out of this judging ourselves. But when I can talk to myself the way I speak to my dog, if my dog doesn't feel good or her stomach hurts, I don't say, oh, you shouldn't have eaten that. You shouldn't have eaten this. The way I would used to judge myself, I would say, oh, sweetheart, come here. Let mommy rub your belly. Let me put this oil on you. Are you okay? Come sit with me. Let's cuddle. These are all the things I would say to my dog, as like you would talk about your child. That's mercy.
Yeah.
And when we can begin to do that to ourselves, with ourselves, that is a divine experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes I mean that in the most simplistic way. And sometimes I mean that in deeply moving ways.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the name of the mercy practice, is how we treat ourselves when we think we screwed up.
Yeah. I think to me that is one of the biggest definitions of what impeccable soul care is all about, right? It's being able to see that within ourselves and to know, like you had said about the changing of the seasons can even be in a day here in Michigan. That's what impeccable soul care is all about. It really is. Okay, so we're down to the wire. We only have about a minute or two left, and
okay,
we're gonna have to do this again because we have a lot more to cover. But really, what I want to say is that I appreciate the tools that you shared, and I could even see myself. You know, I'm constantly learning myself, for my practice, for my family, for my community. And I can see where that would be so beneficial to write those things down when I'm at that place where I'm spiraling. I always say I feel so fortunate that I have so many tools, and that it's now more moments in my life that are like that, not such long term, right? It's not a full day. It's not a week. It's not a year. It's not, it's not a decade. It's more momentary. And to be able to recognize that and have that tool to write it down is beautiful. And if the listeners would like to work with you and be in any of your upcoming classes or groups, how would they do that?
They can go to my website, which is basically just my name, juliebooksh.com. They can sign up they can look at the classes I have coming up, but they can also sign up to be on my newsletter, where they will get the announcements of any and all of my offerings. So whether it's classes or small groups or talks that I'm giving, that's the best way. And they can always email me if they have a question or something, julie@juliebooksh.com, if they want to connect and make sure they're on the list or whatever it might be. I'm also on social media, but the website is the best way to make sure you're getting everything.
And don't you have a workshop on mercy right now?
I don't. Oh, actually, it's actually a free class on my website.
Awesome.
Inner Mercy.
Awesome.
I just had my web people tweak something, so it's not obvious that it's free, which I have to go change, but you'll see it. It's called Inner Mercy. That's a free pre-recorded webinar that I did, where I am very much in the moment of that class. And it's an hour long too. So if you're going to do it, you might want to watch it in segments, but it's an hour long, just so you know what to expect. So you can go and sign up for that as just a, kind of an intro, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that after all this time, it finally worked out. And we're going to make it happen again. Thank you.
I would love that, Teri. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.